The cosmological argument is a philosophical argument for the existence of God. It argues that a being outside of our universe caused the universe. The philosophical statement for this argument is a bit more structured, but that's basically what this argument is about. But can a philosophical argument actually prove God exists? That is an excellent question, because philosophy cannot prove things in the same way that science or mathematics can. Instead, philosophy aims to provide reasoned arguments and justifications for various claims and positions by critically examining the assumptions underlying different philosophical arguments. By way of example, do you believe that love exists? Have you ever been in love? Have you been hurt by love? Are you in love now? How would you prove that? And is there a difference between the deep, abiding love of a married couple who's been married for 60 years versus the love of a mother for her child? And how can you know? How about the love of a 5-year-old for a parent? You can see it, but can you prove it exists? How can you tell a 15-year-old that he or she really isn't in love but simply infatuated? How about the loving bond between brothers? The love you have for your grandma? How can you prove different kinds of love if you cannot even prove love exists in the first place, even though you know in your heart that it does? It is impossible to prove love scientifically, but does that somehow invalidate the love you have in your life? Can your heart no longer give or receive love because your mind knows that science cannot prove that it exists? Wouldn't that seem a rather silly and idiotic position to take in your life? Would you really allow some concept of science to control that much of your life? Clearly, science is limited in what it can measure and explain, right? But you could ask a philosopher to give you a very compelling argument for the existence of these things, and, more importantly, you can become philosophical yourself. And for this video, that's what we're going to do. We will become philosophers together. So with that bit of introduction, let's dive right in and examine the philosophical argument for the existence of God, using both philosophy and science. The cosmological argument has a long and rich history, dating back to ancient Greece, where philosophers such as Aristotle and Plato discussed the concept of the first cause. In medieval philosophy, the argument was developed and refined by theologians such as Thomas Aquinas, who formulated what's known as the first cause argument. But it was the medieval Muslim philosophy of the Cosmological argument that specifically and so succinctly addressed the origin of the universe. The Kalam argument states, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. The first premise, everything that begins has a cause, is based on the law of causality, which is widely accepted as the idea that every effect has a cause, that there is a necessary relationship between cause and effect, and that one event cannot happen without a preceding event that brought it about. The second premise, however, that the universe began to exist was, hundreds of years ago, the weak link to the Kalam logic statement. In order for the Kalam argument to be validated, it had to be shown that the universe began to exist. And that didn't happen for hundreds of years until as recently as the 1960s, when the Big Bang Theory was nearly unanimously accepted by the science community as the cause for the beginning of the universe. This was a big deal for scientists and a big deal for the proponents of the Kalam argument, because nobody in or out of the science community could argue that the universe did not have a beginning. The Big Bang Theory is so important, it deserves a little bit of explanation. The theory states that the universe began around 13.8 billion years ago as a singularity, an infinitely hot and dense point that exploded in a monstrously spectacular fashion. The explosion continued to expand outwards in what's known as the inflationary period, and then gradually cooled over time to become the universe that we observe today. It was such a massive explosion that it is, still to this day, blasting matter to the edges of the universe at unimaginable speeds. Like I said, monster explosion. To effectively prove that this Big Bang occurred, scientists theorized that 3 things needed to be proven. First, that the universe was still expanding as opposed to being in a steady state. Second, the existence of uniform background radiation. And third, that there would be an abundance of light elements in the universe scattered throughout pretty evenly: helium, hydrogen, and lithium. The continued expansion of the universe was discovered by Edwin Hubble. Hubble was an astronomer at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California in 1929 and observed that light from distant galaxies was shifted towards longer, redder wavelengths, indicating that those galaxies were moving away from us. Hubble also observed that the more distant a galaxy was from us, the faster it was moving away. This became known as Hubble's law. This provided strong support for the idea that the universe began in a hot, dense state and has been expanding ever since. If you didn't know why America's first space telescope was named the Hubble telescope, now you do. The existence of a uniform background radiation in the observable universe was discovered in 1964 by scientists at Bell Laboratories while conducting radio astronomy experiments. After several failed attempts to determine what these signals were, they eventually realized that the signal they were receiving was the cosmic microwave background radiation predicted by the Big Bang Theory. This discovery provided strong evidence in support of the Big Bang Theory and has become one of the most significant pieces of evidence. It helped to confirm that the universe had a beginning and that it was once much hotter and denser than it is today. Lastly, the theory that there would be an abundance of light elements, hydrogen, helium, and lithium, was based on the conditions of what would have necessarily happened in the early universe after the large explosion predicted by the Big Bang Theory. The discovery of the predicted abundance of light elements in the universe was made by a team of astrophysicists in the 1950s and 60s. They used observations from the spectra of stars to determine the abundance of different elements in the universe, and the results were consistent with the predictions of the Big Bang Theory. These three major discoveries, the redshift of expanding galaxies, cosmic background radiation, and the abundance of light elements, cemented the universal support of the Big Bang Theory and helped to establish it as the most widely accepted explanation for the beginning and evolution of the universe. Who knew that the weak link of the Kalam cosmological argument would be confirmed by the science community? Thanks, science community. We couldn't have done it without you. According to science, the universe did indeed have a beginning with a very big bang. And according to Kalam and the law of causality, if the universe began to exist, then the universe had a cause. The Kalam cosmological argument now had very strong scientific support. So, did all the scientists run out to their local church and dedicate their life to God? No. Some did, and even some wrote books about it. Many were stunned by the outcome and demoralized by its implications. To be sure, there were many scientists in the scientific community who simply could not ignore what the evidence was pointing to and had their worldview shaken by the establishment of the Big Bang Theory. One such man was a titan in the scientific community at that time. His name was Robert Jastrow. Robert Jastrow studied physics and received his undergraduate and graduate education at Columbia University. In 1958, he joined the newly formed National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, as the head of its theoretical division. He also served as the founding director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, which he led until his retirement from NASA in 1981. This man was one of the top administrators and certainly one of the very top minds at NASA from 1958 to 1981. He was in the middle of all of it when the Big Bang Theory was being established and when we were going to the moon. In 1982, Jastrow said this during an interview, quote, "Astronomers now find that they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation, to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in this cosmos and on the earth. And they have found that all this happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact." End quote. Jastrow became agnostic as it relates to God and wrote a book in 1992 called God and the Astronomers. In it, he argued that the Big Bang Theory provided evidence for the existence of a creator. He wrote, quote, "For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, this story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries, end quote. So where does this leave you? And understand this, I made this video just for you. Upon hearing these words, do you think it remotely possible that you somehow know something about the cosmological argument that Robert Jastrow didn't know or understand? Not likely. This one man, one of the greatest scientific minds of our modern age, smarter and better educated than you or me, or likely anyone you will ever know or ever meet, steeped for decades in critical thinking and mind-bending mathematics, saw the writing on the wall, and had the honesty, no matter how bitter this pill was to swallow, to acknowledge the truth. And that truth is, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, with very little effort at all, we can conclude that it is logical, that it is rational, and that it is reasonable to believe that the universe was caused by a first cause, the uncaused cause, God. Again, logic, reason, and rational thought. I would like to leave you with this to ponder until our next video. Think about what began at the Big Bang: space, time, and matter. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, space, time, and matter are inexorably bound together. This means that the uncaused first cause then must have been spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. It must also have been powerful, personal, to be able to choose to create, and intelligent, to know how to create. That leaves us with a universe that was caused by an uncaused first cause, that is, spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, superintelligent. When you consider a being with all those attributes, who do you immediately think of? Thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. I made it just for you. Please click the subscribe button and the notification bell, and be sure to like this video and share with your friends and loved ones. For more detailed discussions on this subject matter, please visit our blog, and be sure to click on and watch the next video. Thanks so much.